What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review the season 4 premiere of What We Do in the Shadows, which aired tonight on FX, but I believe the first two episodes are going to be posted tomorrow on Hulu, and I was late to the game on this show. I mean, I saw the movie, almost 8-9 years ago when it first came out. But it's incredible to me that what started as a short film back in 2005 with Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement, like very much in the early days of their filmmaking careers, that the ideas had legs that have lasted up till 2022 with this monster hit show. But I got caught up on this show early in 2022, and while I was binging those 3 seasons, I can't remember the last time a show has made me laugh that hard. I mean, there were times where I felt like I had a knife in my side. I was just like, oh! I mean, I was just in pain from laughing so hard, where I'd be like having to force myself to breathe because I was choking. I do not take that lightly, and so I've got a lot of love for this show. And it's one of those shows where pretty much every time, like Laszlo or Nadia or Nandor say anything, it kind of shuffles the deck on which one is my favorite character. I mean, there's so many great lines like, "Has living in America made you into a big wet pussy?" which just makes me love and adore Nadia. Or when Laszlo says things like, "I didn't become a vampire to end up being a pen-pushing bureaucrat. I became a vampire to suck blood and fuck forever." This is the kind of humor that is absolutely right up my alley. So it kind of wounds me to admit that these first 2 episodes of season 4, they were mildly enjoyable. They were very pleasant. They were totally watchable. But they didn't have me howling, and I was looking over the writers and directors for this season as well as the last one, and sadly, nowhere in any of the credits can you find Taika Waititi or Jermaine Clement, and I feel like, or maybe my prediction is that this show will start to kind of coast, and then we'll eventually run out of gas in the absence of the 2 creators who kind of gave it that initial flavor. And admittedly, they have a great staff of writers and directors, but there's just a very specific stylish humor that Jermaine and Taika have honed together over several movies and shows, and they just make an incredible team. But I imagine their dance cards are full. They got other things on their plate. But my hope is that season 4 will on the whole be more or less about as good as season 3, because once again, it's more or less the exact same writing and directing staff. But when you look at these first 2 episodes, I think it's clear that the absence of Colin Robinson's ongoing commentary and signature brand of humor, it's an ingredient that is missed. I mean, if you compare this show to like a giant soup, every writer, every director, every actor, they add a little spice, they add an ingredient. And the soup just doesn't taste the same without Colin Robinson just doing what he does. I mean, maybe the hardest I've laughed at this entire year, I believe it was in season 3. There's an episode where Laszlo and Colin are going to a party, and Colin is using a Jar Jar Binks voice to Laszlo. And of course, Laszlo has no idea who the fuck Jar Jar Binks is. But Laszlo says, "Oh, that's a nice voice." And Colin's like, "Oh, you don't find it annoying?" He's like, "No, I think it's very funny and deep." And I don't know why, but I had to stop the show, and I had to sat there in the chair just convulsing while listening to that. So I need Colin to come back and just to inject that kind of witty banter back and forth with Laszlo and the other characters. So in terms of what's going on in these first 2 episodes, it's 1 year later. We see that Laszlo is raising baby Colin, trying to basically mold him into the most interesting man that the world has ever seen. Nadia comes home, Nandor comes home, and we see that Guillermo's been there for like a week just banging on the box, but of course Laszlo's been assuming that it's some sort of like pipe issue in the walls. And the first episode had some good bits. I mean, when Laszlo saw Nadia and was like, "Let's fuck," I mean, I was like, all right, yes, this is what they do. And of course, they're boning in front of Nandor, and Laszlo's like, "Yeah, there's some room in the back if you want to join in." I enjoyed all that stuff, and I like how Nadia wants to build a giant nightclub like the one we saw at the beginning of Blade. I feel like this show and the movie and the short are always at their best when they're kind of acknowledging the great vampire shows and movies of the past, and how a lot of the original vampires were modeled on some of the actors' favorite vampires from movies like Gary Oldman and Bram Stoker's Dracula. So hopefully Nadia's dreams of a proper Blade nightclub will come to fruition, including the blood sprinkler. That was one of the best ingredients. I think the movie was 1998 or 1999, but anyway, a lot of people like to credit Spider-Man and X-Men as being the beginning of like the Marvel age or the 21st century superhero craze, but I feel like Blade played a large role in getting that jump started, and for anybody who's not seen Blade 1 and 2 recently, they hold up very well. And there are a couple other lines that had me chuckling in the first episode, like when Laszlo is training baby Colin and having him compare what he describes as important literature versus colorful shit. But on the whole, pretty average episode. And then the second one, might have been a little less interesting. We see how there are all these problems with the wraiths who are getting in the way of, like, basically by killing all the human workers who are trying to build the nightclub. And meanwhile, Nandor uses a genie to summon back from the dead his 37 dead wives, and he basically goes through them one at a time, figuring out which ones annoy the crap out of him, whereupon he re-deads them, as he describes. And some of that was mildly amusing, but nothing on the level of what we saw. Like it was either season 1 or season 2, when he's trying to gain his U.S. citizenship, and they ask him, like, how long should somebody remain a leader in the United States? And he's like, 1,000 years. I mean, some of that shit that Nandor says in the first 2 seasons is some of the craziest shit and some of the funniest shit that I've ever heard. And sadly, this episode is lacking in some of that signature humor. And so I don't want to sound too down on this show, because this show has given me so much joy this year. I mean, like I said, I would just sit in front of the TV, just holding my stomach, like gasping for air, just having so much goddamn fun. It's a delightful show. It just hasn't been delightful yet this season, and so I will be kind of crossing my fingers and just hoping for the best. And if it's one of those situations where the show just happens to run out of its creative juices, I'm sure all the writers, directors, and performers will go on to bigger and better things beyond this. But it would be great if they could recapture that magic at least a few more times before the end of this season. But in that, Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement have proven themselves repeatedly as writers and directors with so many other shows and movies. I think it's becoming abundantly clear that in their absence, the show is stumbling maybe just a tad. But before I go, I got to give a quick shout out that Laszlo would very much approve of. Manscaped is the sponsor of my podcast, Wrong Reel, and they are the world's foremost experts in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision engineered to look after your family jewels. So it's the summer beach season, whether at the pool and like a skinny dipping party erupts, or you're playing volleyball and someone shanks your shorts down, or whatever the case might be. You want to look good when you are, on display to the viewing public. And so go to manscaped.com, look at the Performance Package 4.0, and use the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps. That'll give you 20% off any purchase you make. And I'll leave a link down in the show notes below, giving you all that vital information. But I can't thank you enough for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, I don't know if you enjoyed this or not, but like usually I'm much more like upbeat in my reviews, but this is just sadly one of those kind of lukewarm water situations. So it's hard to have like a really strong take when something's neither great nor horrible. It's just kind of like, hey, it's kind of cool. So at any rate, I'm usually much more colorful in my reactions to shows and movies. At any rate, remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and hope everyone has a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.